October 14, 1979. 5:58 a.m. The morning mist clings to the empty streets of Millbrook County like a shroud, and Officer Teresa Martinez signs into her shift with badge number 40,000. She's 28 years old, 5 years on the force, and known for her meticulous attention to detail. Her patrol car, Unit 47, gleams under the fluorescent lights of the station garage. In exactly 7 hours and 12 minutes, Teresa Martinez will vanish without a trace, leaving behind only her radio crackling with unanswered calls and a mystery that will haunt this small Indiana town for 15 years. Because here's what nobody knew: that crisp October morning, Teresa's patrol car was about to become a tomb, and the swamp that would eventually swallow her truth was already waiting. Before we dive into this twisted mystery that shattered a community and exposed corruption at the highest levels, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more true crime content, and ring that notification bell so you never miss when we uncover the dark secrets hiding in plain sight. This is the story of Officer Teresa Martinez, and how her disappearance revealed that sometimes the badge doesn't protect you from the very people who are supposed to have your back. At least, not according to her traditional Mexican-American family in East Chicago. Her father, Miguel, worked double shifts at the steel mill and wanted his youngest daughter to become a teacher or a nurse. Something safe, something respectable for a woman in 1974. But Teresa had other plans. She stood 5'6" with dark hair always pulled back in a regulation bun, and possessed the kind of quiet determination that made seasoned officers take notice. During her training at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy, she scored in the top 5% of her class in both written examinations and practical exercises. Her firearms instructor noted in her file, "Martinez demonstrates exceptional composure under pressure and natural investigative instincts." By 1979, Teresa had become Millbrook County's first female patrol officer, a distinction that came with both pride and prejudice. The town of Cedar Falls, population 12,400, wasn't quite ready for a woman in uniform. Some residents complained to Sheriff Harold Donovan about that girl playing cop. Others whispered that she'd only gotten the job because of affirmative action policies. Teresa proved them wrong every single day. She worked the 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift, patrolling the rural highways and small towns that made up Millbrook County's 47 square miles. Her beat included stretches of State Route 49, notorious for drug trafficking between Chicago and Indianapolis. While other officers focused on writing traffic tickets, Teresa developed a reputation for thorough investigations that led to significant arrests. In her 5 years with the department, she'd made 43 drug-related arrests, recovered 2 stolen vehicles, and solved a string of rural burglaries that had plagued the county for months. Her case clearance rate was the highest in the department, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by her colleagues, and not always in a good way. Detective Frank Morrison, a 20-year veteran with a beer gut and a chip on his shoulder about female officers, once told the sheriff, "Martinez thinks she's better than the rest of us, always going above and beyond, making the rest of us look bad." But Teresa wasn't trying to make anyone look bad. She was just trying to do her job. On the morning of October 14th, she arrives at the station early, as always. Security footage from the parking lot shows her pulling up in her personal vehicle, a white 1976 Buick Skylark. At 5:47, she walks into the building carrying her duty belt and a brown paper bag containing the turkey sandwich and apple she packed for lunch. The duty sergeant that morning is Bill Crawford, a fair-minded man who respected Teresa's work ethic. He assigns her to patrol Sector 7, the eastern portion of the county that includes State Route 49, and the small farming communities of Riverside and Blackwater Creek. Nothing unusual on the overnight, Crawford tells her during the shift briefing. Johnson pulled over a drunk driver around midnight near mile marker 23, but otherwise quiet. Watch for speeders on 49. County commissioners are complaining about complaints from residents. Teresa nods, makes notes in her field notebook, and heads to the garage to inspect Unit 47, her assigned patrol car. It's a 1978 Dodge Monaco, painted in the department's standard white and blue livery. She checks the oil, tests the radio, ensures her emergency equipment is functioning. Everything appears normal. At exactly 5:58 a.m., she signs the vehicle out and heads into what would become the last shift of her life. The first few hours proceed routinely. At 7:15 a.m., She makes a traffic stop on State Route 49, a speeding violation that results in a warning. The driver later tells investigators that Officer Martinez was professional and courteous. Nothing seemed amiss. At 9:23 a.m., she responds to a minor fender bender in Riverside. The accident report she files is thorough and accurate, her handwriting clear and steady. The last people to see Teresa alive, an elderly farmer named Earl Hutchins, and a traveling salesman from Fort Wayne, both say she seemed perfectly normal, but at 10:30 a.m., something changed. Dispatch tries to raise Unit 47 for a routine check-in. Teresa doesn't respond. This isn't immediately concerning. Officers sometimes get busy with paperwork or citizen contacts. Dispatcher Linda Hayes tries again at 10:45. Still nothing. At 11:00 a.m. Hayes' concern grows. Department policy requires officers to check in every 30 minutes during solo patrol. She attempts contact again. Unit 47. This is dispatch. Please respond for a radio check. Static. Nothing but static. At 11:15 a.m., Sheriff Donovan authorizes a search for the missing patrol car. This is when the mystery truly begins, because what happens next defies explanation. Officer Mike Taylor, searching the northern section of Sector 7, locates Unit 47 at 11:42 a.m. The patrol car is parked on the shoulder of County Road 50, approximately 8 miles from Teresa's last known location. The vehicle appears normal from a distance, properly positioned, emergency lights off, no visible damage. But when Taylor approaches the car, his blood runs cold. The driver's door is standing wide open. Teresa's radio handset dangles from its cord, swaying gently in the October breeze. Her service weapon, a Smith & Wesson Model 10 revolver, lies on the ground beside the open door, all 6 rounds still in the cylinder. Inside the car, Taylor finds Teresa's duty belt on the passenger seat, her notebook open to the page documenting the morning's activities, and her lunch bag sitting unopened on the dashboard. Her car keys are still in the ignition, but Officer Teresa Martinez is nowhere to be found. The scene is both pristine and wrong. There's no sign of a struggle, no blood, no indication of violence. It's as if Teresa simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only the empty shell of her patrol car, and a mystery that would consume the next 15 years. What happened to Officer Teresa Martinez? And why would a dedicated cop abandon her weapon, her duty, and her life without a trace? The answers lie buried in the dark waters of Whistling Pines Swamp, 15 miles away, but it will take a decade and a half before anyone thinks to look there. The initial search for Teresa Martinez is both immediate and intensive. Within 2 hours of finding her abandoned patrol car, Sheriff Harold Donovan mobilizes every available resource in Millbrook County. 12 officers, 6 volunteer firefighters, and 2 tracking dogs begin combing the area around County Road 50. The scene itself tells a confusing story. Crime scene technician Janet Ross, on loan from the state police, processes Unit 47 with meticulous care. She finds Teresa's fingerprints exactly where they should be, on the steering wheel, radio handset, and door handle. There are no foreign fingerprints, no signs of forced entry, no indication that anyone else had been in the vehicle. It's like she just got out and walked away, Ross tells Sheriff Donovan, but that doesn't make sense. No officer abandons their weapon and radio. The tracking dogs pick up Teresa's scent around the patrol car and follow it for approximately 50 yards into the adjacent cornfield, before losing the trail completely. This puzzles the handlers. The dogs are experienced and the weather conditions are ideal for tracking. The scent simply stops, as if Teresa had been lifted into the air. Detective Frank Morrison, despite his earlier criticism of Teresa's work, takes the lead on the investigation. His first theory is that she's been abducted, possibly by drug dealers she'd been targeting in her patrol sector. Morrison knows that Teresa had been building cases against several suspected traffickers operating along State Route 49. She was getting too close to something, Morrison tells reporters at the first press conference. Officer Martinez was an excellent investigator. Someone wanted to stop her. The investigation expands quickly. FBI agent Sarah Coleman arrives from the Indianapolis field office to assist with what's now being treated as a federal kidnapping case. Coleman's background includes several successful recoveries of missing law enforcement officers, and she brings both expertise and resources that the small county department lacks. Agent Coleman's first move is to interview Teresa's family and friends, looking for any indication of personal problems that might explain her disappearance. What she finds is a woman with no apparent motive to vanish voluntarily. Teresa's apartment on Elm Street is modest but tidy. Her rent is paid through the end of the month. Her bank account contains $12,147. Not a fortune, but she's never been in financial trouble. Her car payment is current. Her credit cards have minimal balances. There's no note, no indication of depression or distress. Her sister Maria, who spoke to Teresa by phone the night before her disappearance, tells investigators she was excited about something at work, said she was working on a case that could be big, but she couldn't tell me details. She never talked about specific police business. This detail catches Agent Coleman's attention. She requests access to Teresa's active case files and discovers something interesting. In the weeks before her disappearance, Teresa had been documenting unusual activity along a remote stretch of state. According to her field notes, she'd observed the same vehicles making regular trips between Chicago and Indianapolis, always late at night, always following the same route. She'd noted license plate numbers, times and description. Most significantly, she'd identified a pattern of stops at a truck stop called Mel's Last Chance, located at the intersection of Route 14. Mel's Last Chance is owned by Melvin Carpenter, a 63-year-old former long-haul trucker with a minor criminal history dating back to the 1950s. When agents interview Carpenter, he's cooperative, but claims no knowledge of Teresa or any unusual activity at his establishment. "I see lots of cops come through here," Carpenter tells Agent Coleman. "Can't say I remember any particular one. They buy coffee, use the restroom, maybe grab a sandwich. Nothing unusual about that." But when Coleman reviews Teresa's surveillance notes more carefully, she discovers that the female officer had been documenting more than just suspicious vehicles. She'd been tracking the timing of these stops with the precision of someone building a case. The pattern suggested that Mel's Last Chance was more than just a convenient rest stop. It was a planned waypoint. The investigation takes a darker turn when agents discover that several of the license plates Teresa had documented belonged to vehicles registered to known associates of the Torino crime family, a Chicago-based organization with suspected ties to drug trafficking and money laundering. Vincent "Vinny" Torino is a 45-year-old, made man in the Chicago outfit with a long history of violence and a reputation for eliminating problems permanently. When FBI surveillance photos place his associates at Mel's Last Chance during the time period Teresa was conducting her observations, Agent Coleman realizes they may be dealing with something far more dangerous than a simple kidnapping. But if Teresa stumbled onto a major criminal operation, where is her body? And why was her patrol car abandoned so carefully, without any evidence of violence? The search efforts expand throughout November 1979. Volunteers scour thousands of acres of farmland and forest. Ponds are drained, abandoned buildings are searched, every lead is followed to its conclusion. The State Police Aviation Unit flies grid patterns over Millbrook County for weeks. Nothing. Teresa Martinez has vanished as completely as if she never existed. By December, the media attention begins to fade. The FBI maintains an active investigation, but leads are growing cold. Sheriff Donovan holds a final press conference on December 15th, 3 months after Teresa's disappearance. "We will never give up looking for Officer Martinez," he promises the assembled reporters. "She's one of our own, and we don't abandon our own." But privately, law enforcement officials are beginning to accept a grim reality. Teresa Martinez is almost certainly dead, and whoever killed her was sophisticated enough to hide the crime perfectly. The case file grows thick with dead ends and false leads. Over the next several years, the investigation generates thousands of pages of reports, hundreds of interviews, and dozens of potential suspects. None lead anywhere meaningful. In 1982, a hiker finds decomposed remains in a forest 20 miles south of where Teresa disappeared. The bones are examined by forensic anthropologists and determined to belong to a male victim of Native American ancestry, not Teresa. In 1985, a convicted drug dealer claims he has information about Teresa's murder in exchange for a reduced sentence. His story keeps changing, and polygraph tests indicate deception. The lead goes nowhere. In 1989, construction workers discover a shallow grave containing female remains near Interstate 65. For 48 hours, investigators believe they may have found Teresa's DNA testing, still relatively new, proves the remains belong to a runaway teenager from Ohio, who had been missing for 2 years. Each false lead reopens old wounds for Teresa's family. Her mother, Rosa Martinez, develops a ritual of lighting a candle every Sunday and praying for her daughter's soul. Her father Miguel ages rapidly, the not knowing eating away at him like cancer. The worst part is not knowing. Maria Martinez tells a reporter on the 5th anniversary of her sister's disappearance, "If we knew she was dead, we could grieve. If we knew she was alive somewhere, we could hope. But this is torture." Detective Frank Morrison retires in 1991, 12 years after Teresa's disappearance. At his retirement party, he raises a glass of beer and makes a toast to Teresa Martinez, the best cop this department ever had. "Wherever you are, we haven't forgotten." But Morrison carries a secret he's never shared with anyone, not even his wife. 3 days before Teresa disappeared, she approached him in the station parking lot with a troubling question. "Frank," she had said, "if you discovered that someone in the department was taking money from criminals, what would you do?" Morrison had laughed it off. "That's a hell of a hypothetical question, Martinez. You writing a book or something?" Teresa had looked at him seriously. "Just wondering about the chain of command. You know who you could trust with something like that?" Morrison had shrugged. "I guess you'd go to the sheriff, or maybe internal affairs." "Why?" Teresa had seemed about to say something else, then changed her mind. No reason. Just thinking out loud. Now, sitting in his empty office on his last day, Morrison wonders if Teresa had been trying to tell him something important. Had she discovered corruption in the department? Is that why she disappeared? But if Teresa had evidence of police corruption, where is it? Her case files were thoroughly searched. Her apartment was examined multiple times. If she had been building a case against a fellow officer, that evidence vanished with her. The years pass. New officers join the department. The story of Teresa Martinez becomes departmental legend, a cautionary tale told to rookies about the dangers of police work. Her photograph hangs in the station lobby, a young woman in uniform smiling confidently at a camera, frozen forever at age 28. Sheriff Donovan retires in 1993 and is replaced by his deputy, Robert Hayes, the son of dispatcher Linda Hayes, who first reported Teresa missing. The new sheriff promises to keep the investigation active, but resources are limited and newer cases demand attention. By 1994, 15 years after Teresa's disappearance, the case file sits in a storage room, gathering dust. The FBI has moved on to other priorities. The media has forgotten the name Teresa Martinez. Even her family has begun to accept that they may never know what happened to their daughter and sister. But the swamp remembers. In the dark waters of Whistling Pines, 15 miles from where Teresa's patrol car was found, something waits beneath the surface. Something that will soon reveal its secrets to a group of teenagers looking for the perfect spot to dump a stolen car. And when Unit 47 finally surfaces from its muddy grave, it will bring with it evidence that will shatter everything everyone thought they knew about the disappearance of Officer Teresa Martinez. 3 teenagers from Cedar Falls High School, Jason Kimball, Danny Rodriguez, and Marcus Webb, have a problem. The previous night, in a moment of alcohol-fueled stupidity, they stole a 1987 Honda Civic from the parking lot of the county mall. Now, in the harsh light of morning sobriety, they're terrified of the consequences. "My dad will kill me if he finds out," Jason tells his friends, as they sit in the stolen car at an abandoned gas station. "We have to get rid of this thing." Danny, whose older brother spent 2 years in juvenile detention for auto theft, suggests they strip the car for parts. But Marcus has a simpler idea. "Whistling Pines Swamp. Nobody ever goes back there. We drive it in, let it sink, and walk away." Whistling Pines Swamp is a 400-acre wetland preserve, located 15 miles southeast of Cedar Falls, created by the damming of Blackwater Creek in the 1930s. It's a maze of cypress trees, stagnant water, and thick mud that locals avoid. The access road is gated, but the lock has been broken for years. At 2:30 p.m., the 3 teenagers drive the stolen Honda down the narrow dirt road that leads to the swamp's edge. Their plan is simple: drive the car as far into the water as possible, then wade back to shore and hitchhike home. But when they reach the end of the road, something stops them cold. Approximately 50 yards from shore, the rusted roof of a vehicle breaks the surface of the dark water like the back of some prehistoric creature. What catches their attention isn't just the presence of a submerged car, it's the distinctive light bar visible above the waterline. "Holy shit," Danny whispers. "That's a cop car." Jason, who has the best eyesight of the 3, peers across the water. The autumn drawdown has lowered the swamp's water level by nearly 3 feet, exposing more of the vehicle than would normally be visible. He can make out faded lettering on what was once a white door. Millbrook County Sheriff Marcus, whose grandfather was a deputy sheriff, recognizes the significance immediately. "Guys, we need to call the police. Like right now." The teenagers abandon their plan to dump the stolen Honda and instead drive directly to the Cedar Falls police station. At 3:15 p.m., Desk Sergeant Tom Bradley receives one of the most important calls in the county's history. "We found a police car in Whistling Pines Swamp," Jason tells him. "It's been there a long time." Bradley's first instinct is to dismiss the call as a prank, but something in the teenager's voice, a nervous sincerity, makes him take notes. When Jason mentions the light bar and the county sheriff markings, Bradley's blood runs cold. Every law enforcement officer in Millbrook County knows the story of Teresa Martinez and her missing patrol car. Unit 47 has become a ghost story, a mystery that haunted an entire generation of cops. Could these kids have actually found it? Bradley immediately contacts Sheriff Robert Hayes, who authorizes an emergency response to Whistling Pines Swamp. By 4, a convoy of police vehicles, fire department rescue units and a crane from the county highway department is threading its way down the narrow access road. The scene at the swamp is both eerie and electric. With anticipation, Sheriff Hayes stands at the water's edge, studying the partially submerged vehicle through binoculars. Even from a distance, he can see enough detail to confirm what everyone is thinking, but afraid to say out loud. "That's Unit 47, he tells Detective Lisa Park, who has driven down from the state police post. "After 15 years, we found her car." The recovery operation begins immediately, but it's complicated by the swamp's unstable bottom and the approaching darkness. The crane operator, Eddie Mosca, has 30 years of experience pulling vehicles from ditches and ponds, but nothing quite like this. "We're going to need to work carefully," Mosca tells Sheriff Hayes. "That car's been down there a long time. If there's evidence inside, we don't want to destroy it." The implications hang heavy in the humid air. Everyone present understands that Unit 47 isn't just a missing vehicle, it's potentially a crime scene, and quite possibly a tomb. The actual recovery takes 4 hours. Working by floodlight, Mosca's crew carefully positions the crane and attaches cables to the submerged patrol car's frame. At 8:47 p.m., Unit 47 breaks the surface of Whistling Pines Swamp for the first time in 15 years. Water pours from the vehicle as it's lifted, along with 15 years' worth of mud, vegetation, and decay. The once white patrol car is now rust brown and covered in algae. The windows are intact, but obscured by years of accumulated sediment. But it's what everyone can't see, what's inside the car, that has their hearts racing. As Unit 47 is lowered onto the shore, Sheriff Hayes approaches with a flashlight. The passenger compartment is filled with murky water and debris, making it impossible to see clearly. He tries the driver's door, but it's stuck shut by rust and sediment. "We need to get this to the crime lab," he tells Detective Park. "Whatever's in there, it needs to be processed properly." The submerged patrol car is loaded onto a flatbed truck and transported to the Indiana State Police Crime Laboratory in Indianapolis. Dr. Rebecca Stone, the state's chief forensic examiner, is called in to oversee what could be one of the most important evidence recoveries in state history. The next morning, March 19, 1994, Dr. Stone and her team begin the painstaking process of examining Unit 47. Working in a controlled environment, they carefully drain the remaining water and begin removing layers of mud and organic debris. The passenger compartment tells a story that immediately contradicts the original crime scene. Teresa's duty belt, which was found on the passenger seat when the car was first discovered empty in 1979, is nowhere to be found. Neither is her service weapon, which had been lying beside the open driver's door. But there's something else, something that changes everything. Wedged beneath the driver's seat, preserved by the anaerobic environment of the swamp, is a waterproof evidence bag containing a cassette tape and several pages of handwritten notes. The evidence bag bears Teresa's signature and the date, October 13, 1979, one day before her disappearance. When Dr. Stone plays the cassette tape on a specialized audio recovery system, Teresa Martinez speaks from beyond the grave. "This is Officer Teresa Martinez. Badge 47-1, recording a personal memo on October 13. Teresa's voice is clear and professional, but there's an undercurrent of tension. I've discovered evidence of corruption within the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department, involving drug money and protection of criminal enterprises. The tape continues for 47 minutes. In methodical detail, Teresa documents a conspiracy involving 3 deputies, a detective, and someone she refers to only as the inside man. She describes observing cash payments, witnessing the destruction of evidence, and discovering that arrest reports were being falsified to protect certain suspects. But the most shocking revelation comes near the end of the recording. I believe Detective Frank Morrison is the primary coordinator of this operation. He's been feeding information to the Torino organization about upcoming raids and arrests. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to present this evidence to Sheriff Donovan. If something happens to me, this tape will prove that I didn't just disappear. The handwritten notes provide additional details, including dates, times and locations of observed meetings between deputies and known criminals. Teresa had been building an airtight case against corruption in her own department, corruption that reached much higher than anyone had suspected. Dr. Stone's team makes one more crucial discovery. Trapped in the vehicle's ventilation system, they find fragments of fabric and several strands of hair that don't match Teresa's DNA profile. The fragments suggest that someone else was in Unit 47 after Teresa disappeared, someone who helped stage the scene to make it look like she had simply vanished. But perhaps the most telling piece of evidence is what's missing. Teresa's body isn't in the car. After 15 years underwater, Unit 47 contains her evidence, but not her remains. This suggests that whoever killed her disposed of the body separately, then drove her patrol car to Whistling Pines Swamp to hide the evidence of their corruption. The investigation that follows is swift and devastating. Armed with Teresa's recordings and notes, FBI agents and state police detectives begin building cases against the officers she had identified. Within days, the corruption scandal explodes across state and national media. Detective Frank Morrison, now 62 and living on his pension in Florida, is arrested at his Naples condominium on March 24. The evidence against him is overwhelming, not just from Teresa's tape, but from financial records showing unexplained deposits and a lifestyle that far exceeded his police salary. But Morrison, faced with federal charges that could result in life imprisonment, decides to cooperate. What he tells investigators about the night Teresa Martinez died will finally answer the question that has haunted Millbrook County for 15 years, and his confession will reveal that Teresa's murder was even more cold-blooded and calculated than anyone had imagined. The interrogation of Frank Morrison takes place on March 26, 1994. In a sterile conference room at the federal building in Indianapolis. Present are FBI agent Sarah Coleman, the same agent who worked Teresa's disappearance 15 years earlier, Indiana State Police Detective Lisa Park, and Morrison's attorney David Kellner. Morrison sits across from the investigators, a heavy-set man whose hands shake slightly as he lights his 3rd cigarette of the morning. The weight of 15 years has aged him poorly, and the stress of his arrest shows in the deep lines around his eyes. My client is prepared to cooperate fully, Attorney Kellner announces, in exchange for consideration regarding sentencing. Agent Coleman leans forward. She's been waiting 15 years for this moment. Tell us about the night Teresa Martinez. Morrison takes a long drag from his cigarette, before beginning what will become one of the most detailed murder confessions in Indiana history. Teresa called me at home around 10:45 p.m. on October 13th, Morrison begins. She said she needed to meet with me urgently about something she'd discovered. She wouldn't say what over the phone, just that it was sensitive and she needed advice from someone she could trust. The irony of Teresa trusting the very man who would kill her isn't lost on anyone in the room. Morrison continues, we agreed to meet at the old grain elevator on County Road 150 at midnight. It was isolated, private. I thought maybe she'd stumbled onto something that could cause problems for our operation. Your operation? Detective Park prompts. The arrangement with the Torino. We'd been providing them protection for their drug shipments through Millbrook County for about 2 years. It started small, just looking the other way when certain vehicles passed through, but it grew into something bigger. Morrison explains how the corruption network operates. Vincent Torino's organization moved cocaine and heroin from Chicago to distributors in Indianapolis and Louisville, using State Route 49 as their primary corridor. In exchange for advance warning about police activities and the occasional destroyed evidence file, Participating officers received monthly payments of $2,000 to $5,000. Who else was involved? Agent Coleman asked. Morrison provides a list that devastates the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Chief Walter Pike, Detective Raymond Kowalski, patrol officers, Dennis Murphy, and Carl Hendricks, and most shockingly, Sheriff Harold Donovan himself. Donovan wasn't hands-on, Morrison clarified, but he knew what was happening, and took his cut. He's the one who recruited me to coordinate things. The confession continues with Morrison describing the midnight meeting with Teresa. When she arrived at the grain elevator in Unit 47, she was carrying a briefcase containing her evidence files, and the cassette recording she'd made earlier that evening. She laid it all out for me, Morrison says, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Names, dates, amounts of money. She had photographs of Pike meeting with Torino's people. She had copies of evidence reports that had been altered. She had everything. Teresa's fatal mistake was trusting Morrison to help her bring the corruption to light. Instead, she had just handed her killer a detailed inventory of evidence that needed to be destroyed. I told her she was right to bring this to me, Morrison continues. I said we needed to move carefully, that we should meet with Sheriff Donovan together in the morning to present the evidence. She believed me. Morrison had excused himself to make a phone call, ostensibly to set up a meeting with the sheriff. Instead, he called Deputy Chief Pike and explained the situation. Pike's response was immediate and brutal. Teresa Martinez had to be eliminated, along with all her evidence. When Morrison returned to his police cruiser, he was carrying a .38 caliber revolver, his backup weapon, unregistered and untraceable. Teresa was sitting in her patrol car reviewing her notes, completely unaware that she had just signed her own death warrant. I walked up to her driver's side window, Morrison says, his voice now barely audible. She rolled it down, smiled at me, asked if I'd reached the sheriff. That's when I shot her. The single bullet entered Teresa's head just above her left ear, killing her instantly. Morrison's description of the murder is clinical, devoid of emotion, as if he's recounting someone else's actions. I had to move fast. Pike was on his way with Murphy and Hendricks to help clean up the mess. We had maybe 30 minutes before other patrol units might come looking for her. The cover-up that followed was meticulously planned and brutally efficient. Pike arrived with the other corrupt officers at 12:47 a.m., bringing plastic sheeting, cleaning supplies, and a plan to dispose of both Teresa's body and her evidence. Teresa's body was wrapped in plastic and loaded into Pike's personal truck. Her briefcase and all the evidence files were destroyed in a burn barrel behind Murphy's farm. The cassette tape was overlooked in the chaos. Morrison thought Teresa had only made notes, not an audio recording. The most devious part of the plan involved staging Teresa's disappearance to look like a kidnapping rather than a murder. The conspirators drove Unit 47 to County Road 150, carefully positioned it to suggest Teresa had been abducted during a routine stop. They placed her duty belt on the passenger seat and dropped her service weapon beside the open door. We wanted it to look like drug dealers had grabbed her, Morrison explains. That way, the investigation would focus on outside threats instead of looking at the department. But there was still the problem of the patrol car itself. Unit 47 contained trace evidence that could eventually link the conspirators to Teresa's murder. Fibers from the plastic sheeting, gunshot residue, possibly even blood evidence that they'd missed during their hasty cleanup. Pike's solution was brilliant in its simplicity. They would hide the car long enough for any forensic evidence to degrade, then discover it in a location that suggested Teresa had been kidnapped and the vehicle abandoned. The plan was to leave Unit 47 underwater for 6 months, maybe a year, Morrison says, long enough for DNA and fingerprint evidence to be destroyed. Then we'd get an anonymous tip about a car in the swamp and find it during a search. But the plan went wrong almost immediately. When Unit 47 was driven into Whistling Pines Swamp in the early morning hours of October 15th, it sank much deeper than expected. The soft bottom and tangled vegetation trapped the vehicle completely, making it impossible to retrieve without heavy equipment. Pike was furious, Morrison recalled. We realized we couldn't get the car back out without causing a scene that would draw attention, so we decided to leave it there permanently and hope it was never found. The conspirators had also underestimated the depth of Teresa's investigation. Over the following months, as FBI agents combed through her case files and interviewed potential suspects, it became clear that she had been much closer to exposing the corruption than anyone realized. We thought we'd gotten all her evidence. Morrison admitted. We had no idea she'd hidden that tape in the car. Morrison's confession continues for 3 hours, detailing not just Teresa's murder but the extensive corruption network that made it necessary. The amounts of money involved were staggering. Over the 2-year period, Torino's organization had paid approximately $300,000 to Millbrook County law enforcement officials. But money wasn't the only motivation. Morrison reveals that Detective Kowalski had accumulated significant gambling debts to bookmakers connected to the Torino family. Deputy Murphy was being blackmailed over an extramarital affair that had been photographed by criminal associates. The corruption had multiple hooks into the department, making it almost impossible for honest hosts to expose it. Teresa was the first one to put it all together, Morrison says. She was too good a cop for her own good. When Agent Coleman asks about Teresa's body, Morrison's voice breaks for the first time during the interrogation. Pike and Murphy took her to the old rock quarry outside Riverside. They weighted her down and threw her in the deepest part. The quarry's over 200 feet deep. She's never coming up. The location Morrison describes is Riverside Quarry, a water-filled limestone pit that was abandoned in the 1960s. Local legends claim it's bottomless, though geological surveys indicate a maximum depth of the quarry has been the subject of numerous diving expeditions over the years, but its steep walls and poor visibility make it extremely dangerous to explore. As Morrison's confession concludes, the full scope of the conspiracy becomes clear. Teresa Martinez wasn't just killed to protect a corruption scheme. She was murdered by the very people she had dedicated her life to serving alongside. Her trust in Morrison, her belief in the integrity of law enforcement, had been used as weapons against her. Do you have any remorse for what you did? Detective Park asks as the interview winds down. Morrison stubs out his cigarette and looks directly at the investigators for the first time. Teresa was a good cop, he says quietly. She deserved better than what we gave her. It's the closest thing to an apology Teresa Martinez will ever receive from the man who murdered her. But Morrison's confession is just the beginning. Armed with his detailed testimony and Teresa's hidden evidence, federal prosecutors begin building cases against everyone involved in the conspiracy. The arrests that follow will destroy the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department and send shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across Indiana. And somewhere in the dark waters of Riverside Quarry, Officer Teresa Martinez finally has the justice she died trying to achieve. The arrests begin at dawn on March 28, 1994, in coordinated raids across 3 states. Federal agents and state police officers descend on the homes of the 6 law enforcement officials named in Frank Morrison's confession, armed with detailed warrants and overwhelming evidence. Former Sheriff Harold Donovan, now 71 and living in retirement in Scottsdale, Arizona, is taken into custody while playing his morning round of golf at the Desert Mountain Club. The sight of FBI agents walking across the pristine fairway to arrest the former lawman becomes an iconic image in newspapers across the country. Deputy Chief Walter Pike, who orchestrated much of the cover-up, is arrested at his home in Cedar Falls. Neighbors watch in shock as the man who had been Millbrook County's highest-ranking active law enforcement official is led away in handcuffs. Pike's wife Dorothy collapses on their front lawn and has to be taken to the hospital. The other conspirators, Detective Raymond Kowalski and officers Dennis Murphy and Carl Hendricks, are similarly arrested without incident. All except Hendricks invoke their right to remain silent and demand attorney. Hendricks, apparently overwhelmed by guilt, immediately confesses and corroborates Morrison's account. The media coverage is unprecedented for a case involving small-town police corruption. National news networks descend on Cedar Falls, transforming the quiet farming community into a symbol of law enforcement failure. The story has everything that captures public attention: a heroic female officer, systemic corruption, organized crime connections, and a murder mystery that took 15 years to solve. The legal proceedings unfold over the next 18 months. Morrison, as the primary cooperating witness, receives a sentence of 25 years to life for Teresa's murder. His cooperation deal saves him from the death penalty but ensures he'll die in prison. Walter Pike, identified as the conspiracy's organizer, receives life imprisonment without possibility of parole. His trial reveals the depth of his involvement with the Torino crime family, including evidence that he provided advance warning of drug raids that allowed millions of dollars worth of contraband to be moved to safety. Harold Donovan, despite his age and claims of minimal involvement, is sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. The former sheriff maintains his innocence throughout the trial, claiming he was unaware of his subordinates' criminal activities. The jury doesn't believe him. Kowalski, Murphy, and Hendricks receive sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. All three are required to make full restitution to the federal government for the bribes they received, though the amounts involved ensure their families will face financial ruin. The Torino crime family members named in Teresa's evidence are prosecuted separately in Chicago. Vincent Torino himself receives a life sentence under federal racketeering statutes, effectively ending his organization's operations in the Midwest. But the legal consequences are only part of Teresa's legacy. Her murder and the corruption it exposed lead to sweeping reforms in how law enforcement agencies are monitored and held accountable. The Indiana legislature passes the Teresa Martinez Law Enforcement Integrity Act in 1995, requiring all police departments in the state to implement enhanced internal affairs procedures and mandatory reporting protocols for suspected corruption. The law also establishes an independent ombudsman office to investigate complaints against law enforcement. The FBI creates the Teresa Martinez Fellowship Program, providing advanced training for investigators specializing in police corruption cases. The program has trained over 300 federal agents and state investigators since its inception, leading to the exposure of corrupt law enforcement officials across the country. Perhaps most significantly, Teresa's case becomes a cornerstone study at police academies nationwide. Her story is used to teach new officers about the importance of integrity and the devastating consequences of corruption. A training video featuring excerpts from her hidden cassette recording has been viewed by thousands of law enforcement personnel. The Millbrook County Sheriff's Department undergoes complete reorganization under federal oversight. Every employee is subjected to polygraph testing and extensive background investigation. Nearly half the department's personnel are found to have had knowledge of corruption activities, leading to the largest law enforcement termination in Indiana history. Robert Hayes, who had been serving as sheriff when Unit 47 was discovered, is cleared of any wrongdoing and appointed to lead the department's reconstruction. His first act is to establish the Officer Teresa Martinez Memorial Fund, providing college scholarships for children of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. A bronze memorial statue of Teresa is erected in the lobby of the new Millbrook County Law Enforcement Center, which opens in 19. The inscription reads, "Officer Teresa Martinez, Badge 4th. She died protecting the integrity of the badge. Her courage revealed the truth." The memorial service for Teresa, held on October 14, 1995, exactly 16 years after her murder, draws over 2,000 law enforcement officers from across the nation. Her family finally has closure, though her body remains lost in the depths of Riverside Quarry. Maria Martinez, Teresa's sister, speaks at the memorial service. "My sister believed that wearing a badge meant something. She believed in justice, in truth, in protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. The men who killed her wore the same badge, but they forgot what it meant." Teresa died to remind all of us. The impact of Teresa's case extends far beyond law enforcement reform. Her story inspires a generation of women to enter careers in policing, with many citing her courage and dedication as motivation to serve. The percentage of female law enforcement officers in Indiana increases by 40% in the decade following her case's resolution. A scholarship program established in Teresa's name at Indiana University has provided funding for over 200 women pursuing careers in criminal justice. The program specifically targets candidates from underrepresented communities, reflecting Teresa's own background as a Mexican-American woman in a predominantly white male profession. Rebecca Stone, the forensic examiner who processed Unit 47, uses Teresa's case to advance underwater crime scene recovery techniques. The methods developed during the investigation of the submerged patrol car have been applied to hundreds of similar cases worldwide, helping to solve numerous cold case murders. The three teenagers who discovered Unit 47 in Whistling Pines Swamp, Jason Kimball, Danny Rodriguez, and Marcus Webb, all pursue careers in law enforcement. Kimball becomes a detective with the Indiana State Police. Rodriguez joins the FBI, and Webb serves as a sheriff's deputy in a neighboring county. All three credit Teresa's story with inspiring their career choices. Frank Morrison dies in federal prison in 2003, 9 years after his conviction. He never expresses remorse beyond his initial statement during interrogation. His death receives minimal media attention, a footnote to a case that changed American law enforcement. Walter Pike lives until 2012, dying of cancer while serving his life sentence. In his final years, he reportedly told fellow inmates that killing Teresa Martinez was the worst mistake of his life, though he never makes any public statements of remorse. Harold Donovan, released from federal prison in 2009 due to failing health, dies 6 months later in Arizona. His obituary mentions his law enforcement career, but omits any reference to his criminal conviction. Teresa's case files, including her cassette recording and handwritten notes, are preserved in the FBI's archives as part of their law enforcement corruption data. Researchers studying police accountability continue to reference her work as an example of exemplary investigative techniques. The case also influences popular culture, inspiring several books, documentaries and television episodes. A 1998 made-for-TV movie titled Badge of Courage, the Teresa Martinez story, brings her story to a national audience, though some family members criticize its dramatized portrayal of events. Whistling Pines Swamp, where Unit 47 was hidden for 15 years, becomes an unlikely pilgrimage site for law enforcement officers and crime enthusiasts. A small memorial marker is placed near the spot where the patrol car was recovered, though the swamp itself remains largely unchanged, a dark reminder of how secrets can stay buried until circumstances bring them to light. On October 14, 2019, exactly 40 years after Teresa's murder, a new generation of Millbrook County Sheriff's deputies gathers at her memorial statue for the annual remembrance ceremony. Many of these officers weren't born when Teresa died, but they understand that her sacrifice made their own careers possible. Sheriff Jennifer Walsh, the first woman elected to lead the Millbrook County Sheriff's Department, addresses the assembled officers. Teresa Martinez showed us that integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when everyone around you is doing wrong. That's the standard she set for all of us. The ceremony concludes with the reading of Teresa's final radio transmission, the last official communication she made before confronting the corruption that would cost her life. Unit 47 to dispatch, beginning patrol of Sector 7, all clear and ready for duty. In death, Officer Teresa Martinez achieved something she never could have accomplished in life. She became the conscience of American law enforcement, a reminder that the badge carries with it an obligation to truth that transcends personal safety or professional loyalty. Her story continues to resonate because it represents both the best and worst of policing, the dedication of officers who risk everything to protect their communities, and the devastating impact when that trust is betrayed from within. Teresa Martinez died at 28, but her legacy will endure as long as there are police officers who understand that integrity is not negotiable, and that sometimes the greatest courage is required not to face criminals in the street, but to confront corruption in the squadron. The dark waters of Whistling Pines Swamp kept her truth hidden for 15 years, but truth, like water, has a way of eventually finding the surface. We're left with a profound question that extends far beyond this single case. How many other Officer Martinez are out there, dedicated law enforcement professionals who discovered corruption in their own departments and paid the ultimate price for their integrity? Teresa's murder was solved only because she was smart enough to document her evidence and hide it where her killers couldn't find it. But how many similar cases remain unsolved because the victims weren't as prepared, or because their evidence was successfully destroyed? The reforms that followed Teresa's case have undoubtedly made law enforcement more accountable and transparent. The independent oversight bodies, enhanced internal affairs procedures, and federal monitoring programs have exposed numerous corruption schemes that might otherwise have continued unchecked. But corruption, like crime itself, evolves. New methods emerge, new technologies create new opportunities for abuse, and new generations of officers must make the same fundamental choice that Teresa faced. Do you serve the badge, or do you make the badge serve you? What makes Teresa's story particularly powerful is that it demonstrates how one person's courage can create change that ripples through generations. Every female officer who enters law enforcement inspired by Teresa's example, every corruption investigation that uses techniques developed from her case, every police academy cadet who learns about integrity through her story, they're all part of her continuing legacy. I want to know what you think about this case. In the comments below, share your thoughts about police accountability and what can be done to prevent another Teresa Martinez tragedy. Do you think the reforms that followed her murder have been effective? What additional changes would you like to see in law enforcement? And if you're interested in more stories about law enforcement officers who went above and beyond the call of duty, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We dive deep into cases where the heroes wear badges and sometimes pay the ultimate price for their service. Remember, Teresa Martinez didn't just die for a principle, she died to prove that principles are worth dying for. In a world where it's easy to become cynical about law enforcement, her story reminds us that there are still officers willing to risk everything to do what's right. The swamp gave up its secrets after 15 years, but the truth Teresa died to protect will live forever. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation.